Coming up this week on Talk with Audrey, genealogist Ruth Hunt was inspired by Alex Haley and went in search of her family history. She now inspires and helps others to start the process of searching their own lineage. And today she'll be sharing her journey and has some tips to help you get started. It's all coming up this week on Talk with Audrey. Insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information to help you improve the quality of your life. This is Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. Inspired by Alex Haley's movie Roots, more people have made the decision to trace their lineage to learn more about their ancestors. And my guest today is a genealogist who was inspired by Alex Haley and went in search of her family history and now inspires and helps others to find their roots through free genealogy presentations and workshops. Welcome, Ruth Hunt, to Talk with Audrey.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Ruth, genealogy. Let's first talk about what it is.
Well, it's the study of one's genetics or their lineage. So a lot of people, when I tell them I'm a genealogist, they tell me, oh yeah, I was looking for a gynecologist, but no, it is a genealogist. And there are just hundreds of organizations that do genealogy research.
And why is genealogy important?
Well, I think it's very important to know who you are and what your composition is. Because I really got started, when I got started, people used to ask me, what are you? What are you? Are you African? What are you? So that was the question when you put it all in a bundle and say I'm African American, but not really know what your lineage truly is. So I have Cherokee Native American ancestry. I have African ancestry, and I'm able to research back to know that I'm Scottish, German, Irish. So it's been quite
a mix.
Quite a mix.
How did you develop this interest in genealogy? Was it through your own search for your lineage?
Well, of course. Well, when I saw the movie, this miniseries with Alex Haley, I was really struck by his ability to be able to trace back to Africa. So, and we had many family reunions during those times, at the 70s and 80s, and so we would have family gatherings, and my father being the youngest of his siblings, and his brothers and sisters being older, I would sit at their feet and ask them the family stories, and what are we, and who was who, and we always had great photographs of my ancestors in my father's sister's home. And so when you see these stoic photographs of my great-grandmother, you wanted to know the story behind her. Because, genealogy is not just knowing the dates and birth dates and death dates. It's knowing the stories that's in between those, what they say, the dash between the birth date and the death date. So I want to know the stories.
And the stories. When I went to your site, I read a number of stories about your family and that you actually helped your father discover his son from World War II.
Absolutely. Well, my father always spoke about the son that he left behind in World War II. And of course, because he was from Virginia, the South, it was against the law to have a relationship or marry interracial marriages. And my brother's mother is English from Southampton, England. So my father always spoke about this brother that we had, and because I developed these skills, I had the opportunity to go to England, and I was able to research his birth certificate, and I put an ad in a newspaper in Southampton, England, and I was just overwhelmed with joy that someone saw it, they sent it to the uncle sent it to the aunt sent it to him in Wales. So you just don't know what you're going to uncover. Genealogy is like a mystery, that you're uncovering these clues that lead you from one thing to the other. It's just fascinating.
But your father hadn't seen his son in how many years?
53 years.
53 years.
Yes, 53 years. And when I first spoke to my brother, he asked many questions. But the final question was Dad still alive? Because as you know, at 53 years, my father was certainly in his 80s, and so I was just thrilled to let him know that my father was still living, so he had to rush himself over from Wales to get to New York, and then we went to Virginia for Thanksgiving dinner. It was just a remarkable a remarkable reunion.
And what a blessing. Well, that your father was able to
reunite with his son after all of those years.
Right. Stories like that they just bring tears to my eyes. So, Ruth, you managed to trace, from what I understand, 5,000 of your relatives?
Yes.
And how long has it taken you?
Well, I use a software. I started out using Family Tree Maker, and that helps me manage all of the names that I find, because you have to have some kind of database to really connect all the dots. But I'm from a family of 8. My mother's from a family of 9. My father's from a family of 6. So you have to imagine that going back all of these different branches to all these relatives, that's how I connected to all of the dots.
That's going to be some book, Ruth.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're going to be different segments, because you can't really mix the various branches together, because I have my maternal side, my maternal side, and trying to keep track of all the branches that branch out from that.
Right. And that's just from you. Well, have you also included your brothers and sisters and their siblings and so on? I mean, were they included in this search?
They're part of the 5,000.
Okay.
So because they, whoever they marry, their children are now a part of another, which not necessarily being on my line, but their parents or let's say my sister's husband, his family. I might put a little bit about him, but I'm not going to go in detail about that. That's for my niece to do. And I'm really right now looking to see who's presenting to me that they're going to carry on this work that I've done. And that's the hard part with a lot of genealogists, because they've done years and years of research, and young people, they want the immediate fix of doing a video, Googling something. But this work takes time. You have to actually, put boots on the ground. You have to I go to Virginia, I go to North Carolina, I go seeking out the information. Because as you know, people of color, they weren't actually documented until 1870. Mm-hmm. After the Civil War, then they were included in the census records. And the census records, they do give us a lot of information. So anything beyond that, for people of color, because we weren't documented, it takes a lot of skill and connection to your lineage, to your roots. Because many of us have the information, but we don't realize we have the information. So, as I said, 1870 began the census records. Beyond that, and how I've been able to get back to, I'm on 1600s on one of my branches, but on my mother's side, they have a family Bible. The family Bible that my great-grandfather, that was his Bible, it documents him being born in 1834. So that's taken me back beyond the 1870s. So you have to look for these types of documents. A family Bible, not census records, but property documents, deeds, and wills.
Oh my goodness.
I've been very fortunate in finding, so now, we have many oral history. We have many stories from our oral history. And in genealogy, you want to document as much as you can and then provide sources that back up the story. So I have been very successful in locating. My great-great-grandfather was said that his slave owner was his father. But I didn't have his father's name. But I was very lucky because, as I said, this work is just going, it takes you down one road and then you have a turn and you get into something else. So at the Library of Virginia, fabulous library, has wonderful documentation there. I was able to find a cohabitating record. And the cohabitating record, that after the Civil War, they created this registry that documented all people of color who were cohabitating together. So maybe your grandparents jumped the broom. They didn't have a legal marriage in the court system, or some did, but it wasn't acknowledged. So after the war, they began to register the couples who were cohabitating, which happened to be my great-great-grandfather and his wife, my great-great-grandmother. And I had never seen this record before, and it actually lists the slave owners of each slave that were cohabitating together.
Who even knew that? That they cohabitated and that there was such a thing as a record of cohabitation versus a marriage license. These are things that are really important to know if you're searching for your lineage.
Exactly.
Wow. My guest is genealogist Ruth Hunt. We'll be right back.
This year at SEMA, car enthusiasts were jumping up and down, literally. Kia's Torque Track, a custom off-road course designed to put the all-new Kia Telluride SUV through its paces, offered attendees a front-row seat to adventure as professional drivers navigated the Telluride through the rugged terrain. Even professional driver Colette Davis had quite the experience.
I've driven a bunch of different vehicles, and the Kia Telluride is an awesome, awesome vehicle to drive.
But if dialing it up a notch is more your speed, then the drifting ride-alongs in the Stinger was the place to be. Going from 0 to 60 miles per hour, passengers were able to get an adrenaline rush without rolling the dice. Pinned against Stinger's race-inspired seats, riders slid around corners before coming to a full stop. The Telluride production model is scheduled to arrive in showrooms starting in early 2019. For more details about Kia's Torque Track, visit kia.com.
Welcome back. My guest is genealogist Ruth Hunt. Before the break, we were talking about some of the types of information that could be helpful to get a complete family history. And Ruth, one was a record of cohabitation versus a marriage license.
So it lists the slave owner, and it lists some of the children, but the librarian in the Library of Virginia, he immediately went and got the will of the slave owner. And in this will, my great-grandfather is listed in the will. So that's a source that backs up what, your finds.
Yes.
And it was just remarkable because now I know that the slave owner is my great-great-great-grandfather, and now I began to research his lineage, which is still my lineage.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting. They were Scottish.
And your great-great-great-grandfather is the one who wrote the book?
No, that's on my maternal side. That's a whole nother story.
Oh my goodness. So you sort of hit a gold mine in terms of the information that you were able to gather to complete your family tree.
Exactly. Well, you're speaking of the Chancellor family, or you're
Yes,
speaking
the
of
Chancellor
the
family.
Chancellor family?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, that's just a marvelous story. Actually, I'm writing a book about that story as well. So I had a great uncle who wrote this book in 1939 about he being the grandson of Catherine Chancellor. Catherine Chancellor was a German. She was a granddaughter of a German immigrant. So the Chancellors came to this country in 1749, and they came to York, Pennsylvania, a German community there, and then they went to North Carolina. So they were very involved with the abolitionists, and so they were very lenient, so they said, with the slave. And Catherine, being one of 5 daughters of Conrad, she had 4 children by the slave. And so this story was actually documented by my great uncle. But he didn't really speak about Catherine's real story, in that I'm a daughter of the American Revolution based on the Chancellor family, because I'm able to trace my ancestry back to the 1700s with the Chancellor family. And Catherine left the white community once she had her first mulatto child. Mm. And then she had 4 others. So there was clearly a relationship here with his name was Appius, the slave. And they said for that time, he was very well spoken, and he took great care to his hair. This is what my great uncle wrote. And so she had these 4 children, and she separated herself from the white community because she knew she would be ostracized because she had mulatto children,
Right.
and they left North Carolina and went to Tennessee. So I began, researching it because it was just fascinating. I didn't grow up with that story. My grandmother, her father died when she was 3, so she didn't grow up with the stories. So I had to uncover this.
And what an amazing job you did in uncovering that information. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, some tips from Ruth to help you trace your family lineage after this. Welcome back. You're watching Talk with Audrey. My guest is genealogist Ruth Hunt. Ruth, you did an amazing job in uncovering information about your family. So if someone was interested in tracing their roots, where would they start?
Well, I would suggest you start with yourself, because you have to know yourself first, who your parents are. And I actually, on my website, I have a chart that you can look at and start to fill in that information for yourself, of starting with yourself, and then you put your parents, your grandparents, your parents' names, and then their parents, and then their parents' parents. So the tree begins to expand as you go back another generation. So that's where you start. And you want to fill in the information that you know first, and you might ask your mother or your father or some older relatives. I also suggest that you do contact the oldest living relative, because most of those people have the stories that go along with the dates, with the birth dates and the death dates and the marriage dates, because
Right.
those are the key. That's the key information that you put on your ancestry chart: the birth date, the death date, the marriage date, where you were born, where someone expired, and where they got married, because that information will also give you a wealth of information. So if you have your birth certificate says who your mother and father are. When you get your parents' birth certificate, it's going to say who their mother and father were. And then the marriage certificate is going to say who their mother and father was and where they were born. So that's how you look at those documents, give you more information, and it helps you get back another generation. And that's what really helped me a lot with my genealogy. The things that I didn't know, I was able to go, like when my parents retired, I'm first generation born in New York. My parents retired back to Virginia, and my godparents retired back to the town that my father's mother came from. So when I would go visit them, I would go to the county clerk's office and I would look for marriage certificates or some kind of record. And I get one marriage certificate for my grandmother, it said who her mother and father was. So then I would look for their marriage, because most people from these small southern states, everybody is born in the same town. So most likely your grandparents are going to be in the same town, and you're going to find both sides of the relatives, unless they came together later on as people begin to migrate. So my grandmother's from Tennessee, my grandfather's from Virginia, but close by. So I'm really researching Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. That's where my roots come from.
And 5,000 extensions. Oh my goodness, that's... Yeah, still, I just find it fascinating. So did you at any point run into any resistance when you asked for information? Because I understand that not everyone and everything that you find in your family tree is going to be wonderful. We hope it is, but, sometimes.
So certainly my mother being a Southerner, don't let the neighbors hear, or don't let, they're very conscious about what the neighbors know. I mean, today, in this world that we live in today, everything is informational and everybody knows everybody's information. You can go on the internet and find out everything about whomever you're interested in. But in those days, or back in the, no one wanted anyone to know anything. I mean, people didn't talk about their experiences or their grandparents or slavery, of those types of stories, because they didn't want to remember, because we did come from difficult times, especially during Jim Crow era and so forth. So I have an aunt who, she had children out of wedlock, and so that was a taboo back in those days. And when I was asking her, inquiring about the Bible, she got very guarded, and she really didn't want me to have the Bibles or look in the Bibles. I don't know, people have secrets that they want to hide. And then as a result of that, it it hinders you from doing the real serious work of genealogy work, of knowing, of just knowing, because we need to write our stories. We don't know our stories, and with the generation the way they're going today, there just seems not like a lot of interest in. When we say people of color, we help build this country, how did we help build the country? What did your grandparents do? I mean, my great uncle was a wielder. My grandfather, I hate to say it, my grandfather was born in 1874. It just seems like so ancient, but he was a barber. All of his brothers were barbers, and they dressed in just fabulous three-piece suits with white jackets. I mean, their shoes were dusty because they had dirt roads, but that was a profession. It was a respected profession. And so people need to tell their stories and know what contributions that our ancestors played in the building of America.
And not to be ashamed of the contributions and the backstory, because it's all
the very fiber of America, and it's something to be proud of.
Right, exactly.
And to say that we were resilient and that we're here to tell the story, that's the blessing, that we're here to tell the stories.
We are indeed. So Ruth, I know that a lot of people are going to go online and do their research, and there are probably more than a few people watching who've already started to discover their roots. And knowing that you can do it right from where you are with what you have, I think is important. Well, can you give us 3 or so tips for starting the search and making that search a fruitful one?
I think number one, it's very important to have your family tree, to begin the process of just, when I give a workshop, I give them in pencil, just start to write down who your people are, your mother, father, grandparents on both sides. And even if you don't know, the success of me finding my brother in England, it tells you that it could be done. Who would have thought that someone may be out there looking for you if you don't know who your father is? But even if your mother doesn't, because I got so many stories that we wouldn't have time for me to tell you all the stories, but there were many people who their parents told them their father was dead, and then they actually found them later on in life, because they didn't want to tell the real story, because these secrets keep people from being together. But I suggest that you write it down. Even if your parents are not living, find out where did they come from, who are their neighbors, who were the friends of the family, because the friends of the families, they know. The one that you call an Aunt May, who was your mother's best friend, who may not be here now, but she has the stories. Or the aunties that knew the family, they know the stories. So you want to write down what you know, but what you don't know, you need to go to the older people or people who knew your family to ask them questions. Because I gave a lecture at Bellevue, and this woman went to Jamaica, and she actually, the father was living on the next block in Harlem, but she didn't know all this time, was a friend of the family, but she found out that was actually her father.
Well, that had to have been an eye-opening experience for her.
But I also think that you can research at home. Ancestry is expensive it's like $150 some a year to belong to Ancestry, that you could search in the comfort of your home. But you can go to the library. They all have it. The Schaumburg has it, or in your local town would have a library with Ancestry that you could use for free. You also want to contact genealogy societies that are from the towns that you might be researching. So I belong to the Afro-American Genealogy Society, Afro-American Historical and Genealogy Society in Harlem. They meet the second Saturday of every month in Harlem at the Kennedy Center on 135th Street. So and you can go online and Google them as well. So I suggest that. And they are national. So we just had a conference in October, people from all over the country that are doing this work and are excited and enthusiastic and happy to connect with other people who might be researching the same geographic area. Even if you have, as I said, the island, Jamaica has all of the information on a lot of the Caribbean islands is housed in Jamaica. The parishes, people who have a Catholic background, the parishes have all of the information. Even the Quakers, they have information too. Latter-day Saints, you can go to their facilities, and they will help you begin your genealogy research.
So many ways to get started and so many resources available for us for free.
Yes, for free.
I thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and my hope is that it encourages everyone else to search for their roots too.
Thank you for having me. I think it's such an important aspect of our lives, and it's so important that we know who we are and we know whose shoulders we're standing on.
For more information about Ruth Hunt and upcoming workshops, visit her site, ruthdhunt.com. And don't forget, you can start out slowly. Just take your time. And I'm sure it's going to take time, and you might meet with some resistance, but persevere. And that's it for this week's show. I'm Audrey Adams. We'll see you right here next week for more insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information.